You raise an issue that I always speak about when I interview some of these government ministers. It's around the size of the defense budgets when you look across the African continent. You ask the question, these defense budgets that we have, to defend what? Colonial borders that we did not set up? It's incredible. I was going to say Minister Naidoo.
No, I think that the one thing we've got to understand is the context of the world we live in today. It's fundamentally different to the world just 2 decades ago. So what is the difference? You know, the fact of the matter is that we've had an internet revolution that has fundamentally changed how we look at the world, how we organize our societies, how we communicate, how we think about health or education or anything in your life today is influenced. Even the notion of growth or determining wealth. You know, take Henry Ford. It took him 60 years before he could build a company that you describe as a global company. Take today, 3 guys sitting in the back room of some student hostel produce an app that makes them billionaires overnight. What is the definition of wealth? So I think the fundamental problem that we have is that we have to rethink everything in the 21st century. Is our education relevant? We've been educating ourselves historically, including Lyal here, to training people to go and look for a job. The reality is that there's no jobs out there. So unless we retrain people to produce the skills that helps you create your own livelihoods and create it in an environment where you understand. I know I was at the Mo Ibrahim Foundation board. We had Mary Robinson, UN Special Envoy on climate at the meeting, giving us a report. We are en route, a trajectory of a 4-degree rise in temperature by 2050. There will be no future for this generation. There'll be no future for you. Because do you understand what it means to go above 2 degrees? What 1 degree rise in temperature destroys 10% of your agricultural production. The world, the next wars are going to be fought about water, grazing land, food. So we are not talking here about some academic exercise. This is about the future of the human species. Yeah. And the last point I want to make, we are the first generation today that understands the science of what will happen in terms of climate change. But we will be the last generation who can act on it. Because after us, there's no game.
Yeah. I'm getting 2 answers here. One, you are saying the solution lies within us. Because if we take the example of Mark Zuckerberg and his friends and how they formed Facebook in a dormitory, right? So it's people using the skills that they get in school and doing something about it. But at the same time, we're also saying we need leadership from the political class. How do we get African leaders to work with those leaders who perhaps may be constrained for one reason or another from being able to implement the change that we require? Because we know politicians take advantage of ignorance. You look at countries, I mean, we mentioned Niger, and we can mention many others. How do we ensure that there are sanctions that are applied, or ways and means in which countries that necessarily do not want to implement change and send the girl child to school and send the children to school are forced to do so? Do we do that at the AU level?
Not sufficiently. I'm just...
We I
think we really need to address the issue of accountability. I'm looking into my mandate as the AU Goodwill Ambassador for the campaign to end child marriage and looking at the unacceptable numbers. We should not even call it marriage because it's a crime. Yeah. We are talking about rape, abduction. We are talking about pedophiles, literally, and we are calling it marriage. And when we look at 74% of girls in a country married under the age of 18, that's unacceptable. So yes, I'm looking forward to the summit adopting the Africa Common Position on ending child marriage. Yeah. But I'm really looking at that being accompanied by resource allocation to education, which goes beyond ABC. Education which allows the girls to go to tertiary education, for not just for jobs, but for entrepreneurship. Sure. But also that Africa is filthy rich. I don't buy the poverty argument of Africa, because Africa is damn rich. It's a question of management and accountability of those resources.
But I wanted to
So
find a way
that's
in which
where, for me, the issue of accountability with the heads of states lies.
I want to find a way in which we can use structures such as the AU, because they enable us to talk to governments that we can't reach from within national borders. Yes, you are saying that it begins with us as individuals, but we know that when you are not empowered, when you have no access to some of these ways in which you can communicate, you will not be able to effect the change that you require. So how can we use the AU to effect that change?
Going the AU route is a complete waste of time.
Wow, okay, I'm alone here.
Because, you know, when you try, we need radical change, we need a step change. The AU would be like, you know, trying to build the Ford company in 1929 and saying that's how you're going to, you know, it's about saying how do you think about completely innovative ways to drive rapid change in Africa. And the AU is full of dinosaurs who think and are only trying to preserve their own power. So that is absolutely the wrong way.
So how do we help the girl child in Burundi, in Niger, in Burkina Faso?
I think that the AU plays a role. You know, the one thing it needs to sort out is its own house. It sits in a building, headquarters built by the Chinese, and 3/4 of its budget comes from the European Union. If we cannot, as Africa, support our organization responsible for governance, I mean, what are we going to support? So first of all, I think people must raise this in the face of the AU. What do you actually do?
But under which structures? This is what I'm struggling with. I want specific ways in which we can reach that person.
There are important structures and important people that are doing good things in AU, but they don't have the political clout because it sits with the heads of state. That's why you've got to create the pressure from outside. Take the issue of agriculture. 70% of our food is produced by women in Africa. Yet the majority of hungry people in Africa are families of these subsistence farmers. What stops a subsistence farmer who's a woman from becoming a successful smallholder farmer? Very small things. It's legal title to land. It's a bit of microfinance in terms of building their own seed banks, in putting irrigation in place and accessing a bit of energy. And if we could then say that, how do we remove these barriers? And that's why you've got to build pressure within countries. The real challenge of changing Africa is at a country level. And the way we change a country is by building power at a local level. So we've got to go back into the villages, into the communities, into the slums and organize our people. There's innovative solutions that don't even require any government intervention. At the end of the day, when you've done something, you go to government and say, this is what you've got to scale up. What is a politician interested in staying in power? I've been there, so I know that. So what is the thing that the politician is scared of? They're scared of demonstrations in the street and someone banging on their door.
Yeah.
They're scared to lose the election at the ballot box. They're scared of reputational damage, and you have a powerful tool that no one can control in your hands, and that's Twitter and the Facebook and the social media. They are powerful tools. Use them to effectively. You should be tweeting everything we're debating here across the world. You have the world at your disposal. We shouldn't be asking you to close your phones down. You need to take this conversation into the rest of Africa. You need to be connecting with millions of young people who feel as frustrated as you are.
Agreed.
And so I think ultimately it's about taking the solutions we know work. It's not rocket science, this.
Okay.
But I think it's about going that the issue, what we have done in Africa is we have so much put the power in the politician and forgot that we have the power.
No, they take the power from us. And they don't give it.
So maybe, they take the power from us, but I'm just looking at how do we use the power in civil society, civic organizing.
How do we take our power back?
How do we take our power back is the conversation.
Yeah.
That it's possible for us.
That's the hashtag, give back the power.
Getting back the power is very powerful. I mean, I see people going to the World Economic Forum. People would prefer to go to the World Economic Forum. It's not even a decision-making body.
No.
And yet it has generated power. It has claimed power. People have claimed power through the World Economic Forum. So I would like to see us in Africa claiming back our power through institutions like private sector organizing around these institutions, media organizing, civil society organizing. Because then the people will start to speak and the politicians in that room would feel the heat from outside.
Yeah.
In many ways, though, I think one thing that's holding us back is an aspect of African culture, which we need to talk about.
Now you're getting in an uncomfortable
Because
conversation.
there are many, many things that are great about African culture and that we should celebrate. But one thing that I think we need to change about our culture is our respect for elders.
Are you saying we should not respect our
No,
elders?
no. We respect our elders, but we respect them completely without ever challenging them.
Okay.
And the problem that we have, I remember growing up at the dinner table, my parents, you speak when you're spoken to. When you go to school, the teacher comes up and what they say is what, the culture of dialogue and challenge is not there. And so therefore, when we talk about our politicians, because at the end of the day, we get the leaders we deserve.
Indeed.
If we sit back and we do nothing, but in order for us to challenge our leaders, we need to change our culture. So that we actually say, even though you are older than me, even though you're 75 years old and you're doing the wrong thing, I'm going to stand up against you and I'm going to challenge you. And that is a problem we have in Africa.
Unfortunately, they've been listening very quietly here and they've not been protesting or making any noise. So let's invite them into the house and hear their voices. We've got two young people who were in conversation with Lyal earlier in the afternoon. And let me introduce them. We've got Marianne Elgoni. She is with the South African Institute of International Affairs. And we also have in the house Taban Puma. He's with the Children's Radio Foundation. Let's begin with Marianne. Your contribution after you saw the report and also your contribution from some of the things that we've been talking about here. I think there are some provocative things that are being asked of you, but let me not try to summarize what you should say or suggest what you should say. Let's hear from you.
Okay, hello. So first I just want to initially just thank everyone for this platform. I think this is exactly what we need as a youth to be discussing with people who are making the policies for our future. But initially I think there's two things, or one thing I want to add and one question that I directly want to pose to our panelists. And the first thing is the discussion, mainly revolved around like youth involvement, and that's something that comes up all the time. And everyone's like, we need to have a seat at the table, we need to hear the youth's voice. And so the first part of that is just the one part that I think we wanted to add, specifically speaking from Youth at SIRE, was this idea of we need to ensure that it's a process. So getting the youth involved isn't something where we're like, okay, hey youth, join this conversation, make a difference, save the world. But I think personally as well, it has to start off with a mindset change. The youth currently, and I used to, I'm a victim of this too, I had a very toxic mindset. I was like, the government sucks, the world sucks, I'm gonna die, I don't wanna involve myself with anything. So I think initially we need to change this mindset by showing the youth that they have this power, right? So, and I think this is done through, as I think it's been said several times, it's like a pure investment in the youth.
Do you know that you have the power now?
Yes, no, I definitely do. I mean, I used to be when I was in, so I'm now.
What happened? What sparked change?
So my turning point was, I was in high school and so at SIRE we have, so we role play the United Nations. We do MUN competitions where I pretend that I'm America and I get up there and I'm like, if I was Barack Obama, I'll tell you to do this. And then it hit a moment where I was like, wait, why am I only purely discussing this in a role play format when I can take what I'm learning here? Because I was learning about American policies, I was learning about, the SDGs, the MDGs, the post-2015 agenda. And I was like, this is information that I am now privileged enough to get, but people around me don't know. And as Mr. Naidoo very nicely said, is we use the internet mentally. The Twitterverse needs to be saturated by us. Instead of having conversations about, I don't know, when Kim Kardashian dyed her hair blonde, which isn't changing the world, well done, good hair color. It's more about what are we going to do in the future and how can I use, for example, my research capabilities to change this. And my turning point was that mind shift where I was like, I want to get involved in politics, even though my father is very against that. But I want to do it. I want to step forward. So I think firstly, we need to have that mind shift. Okay. But the second thing I specifically want to ask the panelists, and I mean, it's one thing for us to say, yeah, we need to have a change, servant leadership is important, and we need to have youth involvement. My biggest issue, and something that's come across with SIRE, because we do a lot of policy engagement, is more of a question of how do we break this? There seems to be a discontinuation between us as the youth who have raw experience, we have feelings, we're energized, we're frustrated, and then adults such as yourself who have the knowledge and the capabilities. I mean, I agree with Fred saying that we need to have youth leaders, we need to start our own political parties, but I'm also thinking realistically, how can we ensure that our voice is heard, so youth involvement, but how do we make it specifically effective? Because it's one thing saying you want me to tweet something and get my cousins and my family on board and my friends on board, but how do we bridge the gap between your knowledge and skills and my pure emotions, and how do we make that effective?
Okay. Do you want to take that?
This afternoon I was asked to make a presentation around child marriage, and I was given 6 minutes. And I have 30 young women with me.
You have 2 minutes.
To the AU Summit. And I simply said, I'm going to speak, but with the 2 young women who have experienced child marriage. And I was told, no ways, you only have 6 minutes, so we need the voice of the leader. And I said, well, the real leaders are these girls who are living the experience. So it's either they speak with me or I don't. So we need to be able to step back, to share space, and to share power in a practical way. And so I'm still struggling to register the young women because the AU said the future is young, bring the young people, want them in. I have them, and now it's accreditation. So that's my question to UNICEF, and I'm really asking to say yes, at times we go all the way out, there's a lot of rhetoric. When we have the young people there, the system is not responsive. So we need practical action from leaders like us and many others to turn our words into practical solutions. So let's have as many young people to accredit as possible, as much as we can, and really that's one way that we can make waves.
Let's share
space. It practical.
Let's share space. I like that phrasing. Can we come to you, Taman?
Thank you. My contribution to this, I would like to firstly talk about the language. The language that is used here and also like in the resource pack that we were given to. It's kind of difficult to understand at some places. And also, they were talking about social media. We also like have friends in rural areas, you know, how do they get like access to social media? And also like events like these, how do we like get to those people who are really affected? You know, because truly speaking, the people who are really affected by these are not like part of this. And also, also talking about the education system, I think that our education system also needs to be like readjusted, you know. The things that we are taught in schools like hardly help us when we go to the real world. You find that they do not like really help us, and they're not like productive to us. We have to like figure stuff out for ourselves. Yeah, thank you.
So what do you think we should do? You talk about the guys who are not here, you talk about perhaps the structures, institutions that are not here. What do you think we should do?
Okay, events like this, we should take them to rural areas, to places like where people are mostly affected, you know, have like interact with them. And then also in schools, like we hardly discuss about like things that really affect us, like as a continent, or maybe like things that affect us like globally. We like focusing mostly on South Africa and stuff like that. Stuff like this, topics like these ones, they have to be like discussed in schools. Yeah.
Right. I wanted to bring 2 other gentlemen into the conversation. They've been silent for a long time.
You know, if you go back to the time when I was your age, we didn't even have television, let alone cell phones.
That's a long time ago.
It's a long time ago. And so we organized. We went out. And we went into the villages, we went into the factories, we stood outside the hostels where people were brutalized, most illiterate, most marginalized in society, and we built organization. A lot of your generation today thinks that activism is like signing an Avaz petition. It's bullshit. What does it change? Okay, it gets on, you know, some donor, and this is another problem, our donors actually create a problem for us. Because you spend so much of your time as NGOs, you spend looking up to some donor, you know, giving you money and preparing a log frame and a business case. You know, I'm reminded of Steve Biko. I went to listen to him when I was 15 years old. There was no log frame and business case there. You know, he gave us a political direction. And we went out and did what was the right thing to do. I think you think too much, you brainstorm too much, too many workshops, too many reports before you do what you know is right. So get on with it, you know. So I think that at the end of the day, I'm saying we used to translate in 5 different languages every meeting. So at the end of the day, I'm saying is that online is a powerful tool. But the mistake you make is think that you can build a whole revolution through Twitter. No country in the world is run by Twitter or Facebook. They're tools. You got to do the real stuff, which is going down there and sitting down with people and working with them.
So the question is, how do we build this culture of activism? And we've got an activist right here. But I wanted to get your thoughts as well as David. Maybe a little more difficult for you, but still, I mean, you're African. What did Peter Tosh say? As long as you're a black man, you're an African. You're here.
We're all
Let me begin with Lyal. We're all African. We started here.
Well, look, I think it's an interesting question, but and I actually noticed that we've got more than one activist on the panel. So we actually this evening we're all activists, I see. So it's see that. But I actually want to talk about, and we spoke about this afternoon, and I think it was actually more enlightening for me to share the conversation with them than I think it was for them to actually gather themselves and to try and kind of articulate some of the views and some of the takeouts from the report. But the one thing that came out from this afternoon, which we seem to be going back there again, is your context. And the context that you guys, or that we're talking about this evening, keeps on referring back to South Africa. And the whole idea is that the context has changed. The context certainly has changed since Jay was an activist driving the liberation movements and things like that here in South Africa. The context is Africa. And you need to start thinking a little bit more about, and this relates now to your point, a little bit more about the context of Africa and connectedness, and the connectedness of people. We spoke about the notion or the concept of integration. I want you to go beyond integration and think about connectedness. The biggest driver of integration is the connectedness of people. You are the people, you are the youth that have to be connected with the others. And that is a fundamental driver for any type of progress, prosperity, whatever you might think. That is the future for you, is your connectedness. And that's in relation to the context of Africa. That's simply what I want to talk about.
Yeah, very, very good point. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, how do you do this? I mean, Greenpeace, as you know, we're in the business of causing disruptive change for the better.
Causing trouble.
People call it trouble. Those who destroy the environment have every reason to be worried. But we are also conscious of the fact that we need to create a billion acts of rebellion and transition from being the heroes that people look up to rather becoming heroes among many. So we are consciously moving towards creating billions of acts of rebellion. So for example, if you look at West Africa, 3 years ago we started focusing on the oceans, the marine life and the economy of it. But you will be surprised to know that we lose close to 35 billion a year from just the ocean. 1 in 4 fish caught in this continent is caught illegal. And what does that do to the millions of people who rely on the ocean as their primary source of nutrition, protein, and livelihood? So we went, instead of doing the classic Greenpeace campaign, we spent nearly a year building the capacity and knowledge among artisanal fisher folks across West Africa. And they took on this campaign, and it became more successful than whatever we've done similarly anywhere in the world, because they have the political capital. Their voices can't be ignored by the politicians in their country. And they actually, in Senegal, directly affected the presidential election that brought Macky Sall to power. And his first presidential action was to cancel all foreign fishing licenses in direct response to that. So this is, I believe, like us as activists, leaders, and so on, should learn, like you said, take a back seat, but empower people. But then you, as the youth in this context, should take on that mantle and not waiting for people to guide too much, but you know the right thing to do. Go out. If this information, if you think is required and necessary for people in rural communities, how do you negotiate, talk, discuss with UNICEF so that you and people like you can take it to communities in Mpumalanga and so on? That is the key thing.
It's now me who is a worry.
Why do you worry?
Because Tawa's question is really my everyday experience. Once the world is moving very fast, there are huge populations being left behind. Because this online thing, apply for your ticket online, book your hotel online, pay deposit online, send a confirmation online.
Don't see a human being.
And there's no human being. But then I have, in my work scene, so many of the girls who are unable to even come here or travel wherever they are even funded. because they are not online. So there is something which is totally exclusionary, which we really need to address, that it's not just about do not leave everybody behind, but make sure everybody's rights are protected. Because I think we need to get back to the discussion on human rights and equity, and also to address this in a way that we address the issue of household poverty. I'm so much concerned that we have this elitist, technocratic discussion around development, which is running very fast, way ahead. And the majority of people are just a statistic. They are not a voice. It's like they have no emotions. So there is something which, when we look into 2030, I have that fear that if our politics remains a politics of elitism, if our way of doing business remains as it is, if our development discourse, I really would like this institute here to maybe do this launch of this report with UNICEF in multi-locations. I think so many of the community organizations would be very much excited to receive a paper copy. Don't say we've sent it online, because that YWCA will not be able to download because they are using a generator. So you still need to ship this report in paper copy. Of course, we are very clear on
Nyaradzayi, I must say the technology is moving so fast. Soon you would not need electricity to charge your phone. I think, I accept your point, but I think we must not ignore the power of this revolution.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally transformative.
Yeah.
The cost, we're at the cutting edge. I sit on the UN Broadband Commission and I sit in the sort of think tank on technology. We're on the cusp of it becoming universal. And it's becoming...
How far are we?
I would say we're close to a decade away from...
Take me to Juba.
No, it will. And this is the reality. We are close to the point where the cost of this technology will drop dramatically. And already I've seen communities, really poor and stranded communities, using the technology, like women farmers, checking what the prices of things that they could be selling in the market, and then having a stronger bargaining position with the middlemen.
Yeah.
But will Africa be owning the technology, or it's just use?
This is another problem.
Well, the challenge is up for these young people to make sure that they actually are part of coming up with that technology.
This is the whole, it goes back to this one question. We said we still act as 54 countries in Africa, and not as a continent.
Yeah.
And this is why integration is so important, because in China, with 1 billion cell phones, they have created a whole industrialization strategy that has built now the ability to become the biggest telecom companies. You look at us in Africa. Is there one company that we built around telecommunications? No. And this is what we've got to address, that if our strategy of building out, if we are building in energy, we should be building African countries that could become global brands.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, is people like you that will be entrepreneurial, that will break down the barriers that stand in front of you.
Yeah, we need to take back the power. David, does any of this tie with some of the stuff that you guys put together in your big comprehensive report? Come in, David.
That's good. Everything that has been said around here resonates, I think. It's not a magic bullet, as I said before. It's everything. We need the print reports, we need the online reports, we need to go to the villages, we need to go to the slums, we need to go to the high rises, we need to go to the low rises. We need everybody to be involved in this. I think we did the report. If you read the last lines in the report, we said that this was really to spark a debate in Africa. That's why we did this report. And we were very clear at the beginning that this wasn't just a bunch of statistics that we wanted to do. We were very clear to try and explore what this meant. But our job was to begin the conversation, to help to begin the conversation, and to let it fly. And it's about these young people taking it out there and not letting it die. To feel a sense of outrage that 50% of all under 5 deaths are in this continent. That 75% of all the people living under $1.25 a day are on this continent. That there are more kids living in fragile situations or out of school on this continent. Are you outraged by that?
Yes.
Well, if you are outraged by that, then do 2 things, which I used to say to people in Latin America. I used to be an economist, I used to work in Latin America. They would always go and say, well, we've got this big debt crisis, it was the fund, the IMF, and their policies, and or the debt is owed to Western banks, and we have bad leaders. And after listening to this for a number of years, I kind of went and said, look, there's two things you've got to do, because I'm a little bit tired of hearing this. One, take responsibility for your own actions.
Yeah.
You're in control of your lives, okay? You can mobilize.
Not
You
the
can make a
girls who are
choice.
being married.
Yeah?
Not
Not
the
the
girls
girls
who are being married.
But there are many people who are in control of their lives, and youth are here. And secondly, look for your own solutions. Do not look out there to the West for your own solution. Do not look to China for your solutions. Make African solutions, and make young African solutions.
Thank you very much, David.